would talk to my teachers, and they would always say the same thing. They would say, well, Rick, just write about what you know. I hated that. Because the thing was, I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything interesting. I was a kid growing up in San Antonio, Texas. It wasn't anything special. I didn't go to any kind of special school or have any kind of special ability that just a regular kid. And so I didn't want to write about what I knew. Instead, I wanted to make things up. But I wasn't writing stories for my kids. I was telling lots of stories in the classroom. And they would always ask me if I wasn't writing books for children. I said, well, I don't have time to do that. But I started thinking, maybe I would like to write something. At the time I was in San Francisco, my wife and I were living out there, and I was a middle school teacher. I got 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, having a good time with that. But I got homesick for Texas, where I was born, and I started thinking, maybe that old thing about writing about what you know, maybe there's something to that after all. I wonder if I should write a book set in Texas. I decided to make it a murder mystery, because that's the sort of thing I liked to read back then. And so I began writing a novel while I was teaching middle school. How do you write a novel? I had no idea. Austin, you can probably guess where that one takes place. This one was a lot of fun to research. I knew I wanted to do a book set in Austin, but I didn't know what it was going to be about. So I went up to Austin and I talked to a bunch of homicide investigators and forensics lab people and ballistics lab people. And one day I was riding around Austin with a sheriff's deputy in his car. And he took me out to a lake called Lake Travis, just outside of Austin. And he told me the story about how this particular lake used to be a river. And then they built a dam, and they flooded the entire valley. So that even today, at the bottom of the lake, 200 feet of water, there's a forest of pecan trees. And I said, wow, can you scuba dive down there? The deputy said, well, you can, but it's very dangerous. In fact, one time, back in the 1970s, 2 scuba divers went down there, and only one came back. Why aren't you putting the 2 things together? Why aren't you writing for us? I said, well, I don't know. I don't have any ideas. That changed when my own son became school age. Now, I have 2 boys, Haley and Patrick. And Haley, when he was in 1st grade, he was having a tough time in school. There's a picture of him in 1st grade. I know, right? And he didn't like reading. He didn't like writing. We didn't know what was going on. Well, it turns out he's dyslexic and he has ADHD, which made a lot of sense. Okay, well, of course, reading is hard. That makes sense now. Of course, he's having trouble in class because he has trouble sitting still. No wonder. But for me, an English teacher, it was really tough to think that my own kid would grow up not liking reading. I used to read to him forever. I mean, even when he was a baby. Whoa, back there. We used to read together. There's me and him as a baby reading Thomas the Tank Engine. Talking about Zeus, the Lord of the Sky, Athena, Ares, and Poseidon, the god of the sea. And then, sadly, I ran out of stories. And he said, Dad, tell me another one tonight. I said, well, bad news, buddy. There aren't any more. There haven't been any new ones in 2,000 years. He said, well, you make one up then. Okay, make up the Greek then. But I thought about that. I thought about the stories my own grandfather used to tell me. And I thought about Alien, how he had ADHD and dyslexia, and how tough that was for him. I thought about Greek mythology. It all sort of came together in my head, and I made up a story off the top of my head. I said, okay, well, one day, there was this boy named Percy Jackson. Had trouble in school, he was ADHD and dyslexic just like you. You know what? He found out that if you have those 2 conditions, that could be a sign that you're very special indeed. You might be a demigod. Your dad, your mom might be a Greek god. Yeah, that's a good point. So I had to make it magic so it appears like it's pocket. Another girl said, the title of the book doesn't work because the original title was Son of the Sea God. And she said, you can't do that. It gives away whose dad is too soon. And I was like, oh yeah. And so I renamed it the Lightning. I sent it off to the publishers. I used a fake name because I was kind of embarrassed. So I came up with this pseudonym, Ransom Reese, if you're curious. And I sent it off. I didn't expect anybody to publish it. Well, almost immediately, 7 different publishers wanted to publish it. I went to this big auction. They were all bidding on it. Hyperion Disney finally picked it up, and they were the winning bidder, and they were so excited. They said, "We have a great idea for the Percy Jackson books, and we want the first title, the first cover, to look like that." Whoops, back. There we go. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. Kind of boring. And so I said, yeah, that is kind of boring. Can't you do something else? So their second try was this. Now, this actually was the cover. It was published with this at the very beginning, in 2005. If you went to the bookstore, look for the light feed, that's what it looked like. The cover artist was somebody who was used to designing video game covers. And his idea was to have all the monsters jumping out, which was kind of interesting. We have Medusa, we have the Minotaur. Everybody saw the three-headed dog and said, "Hey, it's Fluffy from Harry Potter!" I came out of reading it in French because I took French in college. And I figured, well, I wrote a book, how hard can it be? I could not get past the title. Le Voodoo is open. Doesn't that mean the watcher of goat cheese? They tell me that does seem like a game. I don't know, right? Here's the lightning thief in Spanish. I'm not going to try that one. They like to keep it Swedish. And I don't have a cover, but since we are in the temple today, I will say that they are fabulous bestsellers in Israel as well. They are Hebrew editions. Here we have the Lightning Thief in Japanese.
It's a very,
the Japanese translator was very, very diligent. She wanted to make sure she got everything right. So she kept emailing me from Tokyo, asking me questions. One day she was so frustrated, she wrote and she said, "Mr. Riordan, please, what is a wedgie?" Never mind. Pyramids, pretty cool stuff. But very few people know about Egyptian mythology. We just don't know as much about it. I thought it would be fun if I could try to make the Egyptian myths come to life in the same way I did with Percy Jackson's world. And so I began writing a new series called The King Project. Version has these tattoos on his forearm. It's the SPQR, which is Roman. And they can't figure out who he is. Eventually, of course, we find out that he's a Roman demigod in the wrong camp, and things get very complicated. He wakes up in the Roman camp and has no idea who he is or what he's doing there.
Now, before I talk about the short story I wrote, I gotta say one thing. Some of you all think your parents are like embarrassing. Think about mine. I have to worry about him going up in front of crowds of thousands of people every day and showing them my baby pictures. So anyway, he got all the writers in the room to raise their hands, and that's very important to me that there's so many writers in the room, because as he said, I'm a writer myself. My short story in this is called The Sun Magic. What it's about is that I wanted to know what happened to the demigods that fought for Kronos during the war. I wanted to know how they were doing, because Richard doesn't talk about that much. So it follows. Yes, I call him Richard. Everyone asked about that. I'm not actually sure how that started myself. I mean, even you guys call him Rick, so I'm even more formal than y'all. Now, so it follows this kid called Alabaster, who is the son of the goddess of magic, Hecate.
And they're not just swords raised, they're not to engage in battle. It's a pretty serious looking cover. The thing I love about this book is that all 7 demigods of the prophecy are finally all together aboard the Argo 2. They're all together, and it's also Annabeth's story for the first time. I hope you guys will enjoy this book. There will be 2 more in the series, like we're seeing. We have 5 more series. The last thing I would say before we start updating your questions is I know many of you have asked, what's going to happen next? What will I do after the Heroes of Olympus? You may have heard rumors. It is true. Next up, I'm going Norse. And you will, of course, find out what happens after that in book 4. And it really does take a whole year to write every book. So I'm really sorry about the wait. But that's as fast as they can come out. So I hope you like that. All right, next up, guess again to your book.
Hi. Do you think your son do you think that maybe he could write what, like the last book maybe of the Heroes of Olympus?
No, you wanna answer that? Come on up. That'd be my job a lot easier.
The thing is that I'm so busy on my own projects, as he told me, I have a 700-page manuscript that I'm currently revising, and that's a lot. Keep in mind, I'm still in high school, so I'm going to class just like you guys. I have to go home and do homework just like everyone else. And on top of that, I'm like, okay, tonight I have to edit 30 pages.
So I guess that's a no.
I don't like you that much, Richard.
All right. All right, our last question.
What's your favorite Greek myth in life?
My favorite Greek myth, it's interesting that you say that. You know, my favorite Greek myth is actually a myth I haven't really used yet. It's the myth of Orpheus, the musician. I love that story because the thing I like about it is the secret power isn't his strength, it's his music. And he's able to charm everybody. It's so awesome. But I've never really used it in the series, so I'll have to try to do it. Well, I would like to thank you guys for coming